T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Launch Sequence Podcast, where we like to talk about the playing, developing, and hype cycle of video games, particularly Star Citizen at the moment. And I've got repeat guest TenPoundFortyTwo, also somebody who we work together on quite a few of the videos that go out on the second channel and the main channel a bit. And a lot of you actually have been doing a lot more, I think, YouTube this year as well. So I am interested in bringing you on so we could talk about like the general vibe of Star Citizen right now, because Chris Roberts said on his letter from the chairman something a lot of people have said before. If Star Citizen just played stably, if the glitches were gone, if things were smooth, it'd be pretty fun, and I think a lot more people would come back to play it. So I figured we'd talk about what that looks like, what that could realistically look like this year, with how CIG is trying to change their development style and the way they release updates. And also because, you know, your specialty, maybe we talk a little bit about how Star Citizen is actually running these days. So Thanks for joining me, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, it's an exciting time, isn't it? It feels like with 4.0 going into the preview, and the changes ahead coming into this year, it feels like we could be on the verge of some sort of shift in the kind of, or how do you describe it? I guess maybe it is like it's like the kind of tortoise and the hare. Maybe this is the point where we somehow overtake the hare. I don't know what the hare is, but all I can say is things have been going slowly. Maybe this year we'll be making some progress. Hopefully these changes will make a difference. That's my hope, at least.
Yeah, a lot of people might be thinking that sounds like deja vu. Every year,
well,
these content creators get on their microphones and get in front of the cameras, and they say this year's the next year. Blah, blah, blah. Why might it be different this year?
Well, I don't know if it will. I don't know if this year suddenly the game will just this isn't the floodgate opening thing that people often joke about, but it might. I could be wrong, but I don't think. I think this is the start of a new. I mean, you've talked about this. A new way of them doing development that hopefully means over the next few years we're not going through the same thing over and over again. It is the main idea that they talked about in the letter from the chairman. This idea of having an EPTU where they take features that aren't ready and they test them and keep that whole process separate from the main releases sounds in theory like a good idea. So hopefully over time that will produce good results, but whether that will immediately kick into gear this year in like the Q1 patch or something, we'll have to wait and see. But it sounds good on paper. Everything they've said sounds good.
I mean, that's how messaging works, right? Like, if as long as it sounds good now, we're happy. But is it gonna be fulfilled this year? I think the biggest thing is like watching that Q1 patch, and is that gonna show any sort of difference in delivery? Because people like us who've been around for a long time, I'd say anybody who's been around, who started before 2022, I believe, would be familiar with 4 patches a year, even if like maybe it's a couple weeks off, like your March patch comes in April, oh no, your July patch in August, but it was like you would still be able to expect a patch at the end of every quarter. And then 3.18 hit and that all completely broke down. And it seems like they really want to get back to that. And I think that would also help. Just like getting some regularity again with content drops would make people feel less like it's just this struggling runaway project and more like it's something that's organized again.
Yeah, 100%. Whether they can pull that off with this new strategy, we'll see this year. But in theory, regular separating content from features sounds like a really sensible thing to do. I guess the one question will be, will they have enough content to just put out 4 patches a year? As in, what they talked about in the letter, one of the things was that they were kind of looking towards Save Stanton and Overdrive as examples of kind of narrative focused gameplay that they wanted to drop. That kind of is how it kind of speaks, is that they're the sorts of things they want to do. So does that mean they're looking to drop that sort of event in each patch 4 times a year? I don't know, but I mean, all I can say is that my experience with those events, maybe not Overdrive so much, but Save Stanton, the Save Stanton was and is, that's the ridiculous part of it. I'm still not finished. It's been one of the worst experiences I've ever had in any game ever.
Oh
It's
my
been so
gosh.
bad. I'm getting close to 30 hours into the whole event, and I've still not done any of the Idris ones. I had to be
Wow.
carried through the other sections by somebody who's very helpful, but it's been bugs everywhere, missions just not working, not finishing. It's been terrible. So if they are going to do content drops, they better be better than Safe Stanton, in my opinion. But
It better be different content. I mean,
well, yeah.
if it was, let's ask the age old question, really the question of the podcast. If Save Stanton was running well, is it a really good event?
I don't think it is. I don't think it's one of the best they've done. I think the fact that you're just repeating this. So there's 3 stages now. They're meant to be 4, but the distribution center stage just was too awful for performance, so they canned that part. But basically, you repeat, for anybody who's not done it, you repeat 3 missions. I mean, there is a bit of variation. You can do slightly different ones, but 3 phases where you just repeat the missions 6 times. That's not good. That's not good gameplay. I don't think, in my opinion, that's not good content. I think you're just grinding through missions, and especially when they don't work. So the first stage where the way I was doing it, I was doing the one where you go into a space battle, you have to defend a ship. You're supposed to do 6. I ended up trying it 16 times before I finished because it just so often the ships wouldn't spawn, or you completed everything and then the mission didn't complete, and all sorts of things. And it made for a pretty terrible experience. So yeah, even if it worked properly, it's probably, I would say, it's probably the least imaginative event that they've tried to pull off. And I know Overdrive was kind of similar, but that didn't feel like it was completely broken, at least. So maybe my view is slightly kind of adjusted by the fact that it's been such a bad experience. But I'm still not done. I'm gonna have to somehow find a load of friends to just take me through the Idris missions, because I've attempted to do them on my own a couple of times, and that is not possible. And there's nobody on 324.3 actually playing anymore. They're all on 4.0 or trying to be on
Yeah.
4.0. So it's not like each server is just doing the mission. So I'm in genuine trouble at this stage.
A stunning rebuke from 10 Pound. Well, like I said, I haven't played that, and I feel bad about it because, like, obviously I want to be able to speak towards how the game is playing and not just about how the game is supposed to play. But December was just such a freaking busy month. I mean, IAE was so much to cover when it first started, and then December
Yeah.
4.0 coming out and everything. It was, you know this very well. Usually the main channel on Space Tomato is like 4 or 5 videos a month. I think this last month it was 8 to 10. So like
Wow, that many.
there
Wow.
was just not much time to get into Save Stanton, but um I think that is a very significant point what you're saying, and not one that a lot of people focus on, the idea that they are turning towards not just saying, oh, we want to put out more content, but actually pointing to a couple of events and being like, this is the target for how we're going to deliver that content. And I do think that, I think like a event like that would be too much, but I imagine when we see, say, um let's say there's like, you remember the thing we've been reading about in monthly reports, delta signatures, I think they're called, like scanning when you turn on your quantum drive and stuff like that. That kind of stuff, I bet before would have been delivered as like just a single thing dropped into an update, and they're like, oh, it fits, it works. But now we'll probably see that packaged up with like some scanning missions and some other updates to scanning gameplay and stuff. And I do think that that's going to be a better way for people to get access to new stuff, because when you drop new features into Star Citizen, if people don't know about those new features, you just don't experience them, because there's not like a mission or a tutorial or an NPC that encourages you to do them. It's just like you got to know to go out and do that sandbox gameplay. And I think they'll probably get better numbers if those features and things they're dropping in are actually connected to something people care about.
And I think people have been crying out for the narrative side of things to kind of almost put a bit of icing on top of the cake, to just makes things feel a bit more like you're actually playing a game rather than a tech demo in some ways. If everything is just unconnected and yeah, there's no narrative reason why anything is happening, it feels a little bit not like a game. So yeah, I hope, let's see what they do. I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to. No, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I don't want to like get anybody like fired or anything. But I think the pressure is on the mission guys a bit. I think the mission team. We've had so many of these big events now, and they're almost just always bad, like a bad experience. So, I mean, yeah, in
Dang,
my
man.
experience, well, I think if you think back to like the last Xena threat, that was really, really bad in terms of a player's experience. The performance was terrible, and there was some real issues in terms of just how the mission flowed, and just there's always seems to be bizarre bugs in it where it just doesn't really something doesn't quite work or something goes wrong, or
But
even you think back to
is it
go
just
go.
the bugs, or do you feel like it's the actual design of the missions?
I think often it's the bugs. I think often it's they think this will be a good. I think the things that they think will be a good idea would be a good idea if everything worked well. I
Okay.
don't think we've had a. I don't think apart from the original Xena threats where it all kind of worked okay-ish, we've ever had a really good experience of a global event, and that wasn't a really good one. It was just fresh and new at the time. But I didn't try. Blockade Runner recently. I've edited a couple of gameplay videos where for you it just wasn't working,
Hmm.
and so yeah, that's kind of standard. You expect almost to get halfway through the mission and it just doesn't work. But again, the only reason I think there's pressure on them this year is because if we are eliminating some of the issues with server meshing in terms of the servers running a bit better, and if we're saying, yeah, this is the focus here to get these playable and to drop good content, I'm not sure that they've ever, up until this point, really proved that they can drop that sort of narrative big event in a really good way. Yeah, maybe I'm being harsh, but one of the things I personally am interested to see what they might do this year, and this is a long kind of punt, almost a guess, but will they start to fiddle around and mess around with instancing for some of these events to actually try and get them to be in their own space without some of the other performance issues maybe? Will we get an instance version of something like Siege of Orison where instead of you often turn up to Siege of Orison and you find that actually there's a group that's already run through the mission ahead of you, so all you're doing is chasing after them and you can't really do any of the mission, all the kind of codes have been found and everything like that. So will we get instance version of that where we can play in a smaller group where actually the content is kind of just works for the group that you're in? That's one of my, maybe that could come this year, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
A lot of conversation and debate surrounding instances. This is something
Yeah.
that they've been building on over the last couple of years. We've known that they were going to instance hangars and habs.
Mhm.
I know that for sure, at least since they introduced Loreville. So 2018, 2019, we knew they would do that stuff. But they've started to, at this last CitizenCon, talk about, like you
Yep.
just said, instances of actual game spaces. We've already seen Municipal Works, which is going to be kind of
Yep.
instanced under our corpse place. Not instanced in the sense that nobody can enter, just, or sorry, no. Instanced in the sense that it is separated from the rest of the game world. Not
Yeah.
instanced in the sense that, no, that's not, I don't even remember what if it makes it any different from other instanced situations. But ultimately, the idea is creating a more closed off game space for certain situations, which is it does start to tread on that line that they've always kind of pushed of like this whole, oh, everything is always existent and persistent and running together. Instancing kind of splits that game up to the sense
Yeah.
of like how, like, if you instance something enough, is that something that is now outside of the live environment technically still affecting the live environment, and how much
Yeah.
are you able to do that, as you build the game? And I think that's an interesting conversation because they're now starting to talk about fleet battles being instanced, which
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
something people were really looking forward to server meshing making work in a bigger
Yeah.
scale. What do you think of all that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it does seem to slightly go against the original kind of dream and vision of Star Citizen, that it is this big giant universe that everybody's in together. But I think if you go back far enough, there's various bits where Chris would talk about the idea that yes, we'd love to get giant fleet battles all together, but actually even your PC wouldn't be able to deal with all the ships on screen. And so, I mean, technology has come along since then. Computers have got faster and all that sort of stuff. But there's always been a question mark over what's the maximum size of a space fleet battle that you can actually pull off in this game. And the answer to that, we don't know the answer to that yet, and we probably won't. But when you are relying on the NPCs to actually respond, which you want them to do, you want to shoot a ship and it to respond to you. Something like Xenothreat, where it is a bit of kind of it is a narrative story where ideally you'd be able to just play it through without anything breaking. It does make some sense to take a group of 20 or 30 into an instance and run that event. I would like, and I think eventually when the technology is all a bit more mature, I think CIG would like to do both. I think they'd like to have the option for instances, but also the ability to do giant kind of fleet battles as big as they can get. But I think this focus on these sorts of content drops around these sorts of big global event, whatever you want to call them, they must look at them. They must look at the feedback and think, especially going into a year where they're saying we're focusing on playability, how do we make this work? Because they just haven't worked up until this point. And yes, we haven't seen what it would look like with server meshing involved, because in theory, what they could do now is just allocate one of the servers on the shard to an area that's running one of these events, and that might improve everything. But we won't know. And that's the sort of exciting thing that is coming from what they're talking about this year, is that there are things that they can start to experiment with that could really work. They might not, but there are options at least for them to try.
Yeah, that is fair. I think everybody is interested in seeing how these events would work if they were running well. And I think in general, most people who are following this game, like, everybody's got something that ties them to the game, like something that they don't want to see changed. Some people have 100% of the game that they don't want to see changed. Like, some people, if you change one thing, it's like, okay, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm not following anymore. You guys changed the color of that staircase. But everybody has like a sliding scale of how much they're willing to see Star Citizen change. And I think we are definitely seeing things as ideas become code. We're seeing them start to deal with the realities of coding this stuff and have to make some of these changes. But I do think that the instancing is going to be something that we come back to regularly, because it's a tool that they will use throughout the game in different places, and everywhere they use it, people will scrutinize how much it might change what's going on. I think there definitely needs to be safety for people to be able to play in a certain area, and having a closed space where you know that safety is guaranteed is good. But the more we start to create areas that play by different rules, I think the more CIG might have to deal with more weird edge cases and stuff that's not normal. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and if you're a pirate who wants to go to Xenothreat and shoot everybody, which is something that people have done throughout the time that event has existed, well, this isn't good news, because in theory you can't do that. If you're not in the party that enters the incident, you just can't jump in on that. So
we'll see, but that's the thing. Is it instanced to the point where, like, do they instance a fleet battle and anybody who shows up in that area moves into the instance and is playing, or will it be instanced to the point where there's like a maximum amount of people who can be there? Is it certain parties that can be in there? Like, there's a lot of things that can be.
And in theory they could do any of those or all of them, and maybe there might be different events or different things that they do different versions of those. So it is going to be really interesting. But there will, like you say, somebody will get annoyed one way or another. It will be the thing that somebody is upset about. But I think if like we said, if we look at the history of these events and how poorly they've run, and how many issues there have been just because of the way that they've kind of panned out these missions, it makes sense to at least try some instancing.
Well, we will see. I will wait to see how that goes. Let's talk about the game at large and stuff outside of events, more of the sandbox kind of things you're doing normally. Let's, for the sake of the theme of the episode and what this
Mhm.
game would look like if it ran well, let's go through the different professions that we feel exist in this game to an extent that somebody could like log in, play just that profession, and have a decent amount
Okay.
of fun for like at least their first week or two.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start with the easiest one, mining.
Yes.
I think that one has it does not including missions or reputation, which is a big miss for them.
Mhm.
But I think it gives people a decent amount to do if they're interested in that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's is it the only one that isn't tier 0? Like, technically? Is it? I can't remember what tier we're up to on mining now, but it's
I
the
I guess yeah, because they've done like a few updates. They added the components, subcomponents, the
yeah.
gadgets. They changed the resource balances. They've changed the UI quite a bit. They've added new ships, but
It's not
still feels
finished.
just like tier one, you know?
Yeah, maybe.
Like,
Yeah.
and that's something I think a lot of people are wondering is like, what's how far is mining going to go? I wish that's something they did at Star Citizen 1.0 was they were just like, okay, this is our missions, our story, and everything. We're going to show you mining as an example of how far we want to take each profession. Because now everybody's like, you want to hit 1.0 in the next few years, it seems. Does that include having the Orion doing its own kind of mining? Are you going to have the Mole still do the same mining as the Prospector? Are we boring holes into asteroids? Is it all just going to be heating a rock and cracking it, or what's the ultimate vision for this gameplay? And kind of
Yeah.
missed that.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if they, depending on when we think they're aiming for 1.0, I wonder if they kind of think that mining is close to where it wants to be. I mean, I know that that would upset a lot of people, but we know that they're going to change the way mining works in terms of the rocks. We know that the rocks are now going to be, this is right, isn't it? They're going to be single material types.
Hmm.
This is the change that's coming up. So there are changes coming, but in terms of the fundamentals, in terms of the gameplay, in terms of how you actually crack a rock and that sort of things, I wonder if, of all the things that they've got to do to get 1.0 out the door, in terms of features, in terms of gameplay, and as we talk through all the other professions, I wonder if it's not too far off where they're happy for it to be left, if that makes
Yeah,
any sense. As in,
yeah,
it's clearly further ahead than anything else, I think. And it's clearly, if you're going to say to somebody, what's something you can actually get stuck into, mining's probably the one, if you're into that sort of calmer gameplay, that you'd probably go for. But we'll see. Yeah, it's clearly not finished, but when do we think 1.0 is coming? Do we think 1.0 is 3 years away or 5 years away? If they've got lots of time to do everything, then maybe mining will see some improvements. But if it's not as far away as other people might say, then who knows?
yeah.
But it is in a decent state ish now, isn't it? Really?
It is. I think the only thing really missing from it is a reason to do it. Right now,
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
money, but
Yeah.
crafting and base building that it makes so
Exactly.
much difference to mining and how much it
Sure.
matters. But you're right; it's probably pretty close to finished. Like, if you look at the different gameplay we have, mining is up there compared to the other ones. So it's like, why spend time on this when we could do the others? You think the Orion and those kinds of that caliber of mining is going to come after 1.0?
Yeah, I think so. I think the bigger specialist ships are more likely to come after 1.0 because I think there seems to be a real focus on pulling the game together, and I think yeah, especially when we obviously not to drop into topics of controversy, but all the whole AI Blaze and NPC crew stuff, like the bigger ships are the ones that ideally you might have NPC crew
Hmm.
for single players who want to use those ships. So I think if CRG can delay those things to the point where they actually can work on them, I think yeah, it's likely that the big specialist ships are fairly far away, but that's not particularly exciting news for anybody. But that's yeah, maybe I'm wrong, but hopefully I'm wrong.
We'll see. Well, so mining for this year, it's looking like we'll
Yeah.
see resources change, right? They're doing
Hmm.
no multi-material rocks. They're doing all one material, and it's just going to change based on quality. Um, how do you feel about that, by the way?
think it makes sense. I think what we have now is quite interesting in that you've got rocks with different types, but there is a risk that with all the quality stuff, and then obviously with refining and how crafting is going to work, there's a risk that the game gets too complicated. Now, some people would disagree with that and say, no, it needs to get as complicated as possible. But I think if you were to turn up to a rock that's, how do they even display that it's got this quality of this material and this quality of this material? It starts to get pretty complicated. And I think it makes sense to be searching for, say, let's say iron, and so you're just searching for iron. You find rock of iron, you scan, and you look at the quality. The quality is now the thing you're after, that you're looking for. So I think it makes sense, and it will maybe in some ways reduce some complexity in terms of how you search for rocks and the actual gameplay of cracking.
Yeah.
We'll see, but they've chosen to go down that route, and ultimately, I think it's not a terrible choice.
I will be interested in seeing what happens with. I mean, I think the biggest thing is like we need to see some big ramifications in refining.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing to see is how the characteristics of the rocks based on their quality actually affects both the refining process, the crafting process, and then that end thing. Like if I specifically get really good rocks that I'm mined for their quality, I want to know that the gun that gets crafted from them eventually is actually affected by what I did as a miner. So I think that's very important, is like communicating that kind of stuff through the process after mining.
Yeah.
But it's exciting, because mining is one of the basic parts of the manufacturing process. So seeing how much they're focusing on manufacturing, it's like this profession's looking like it's going to be more fun and something maybe to get more into in the coming year.
Yeah, and as far as I can't remember exactly where it was, but I'm sure CRG released some stats that I believe mining and salvage are the most
Makes sense.
used, or most the
The
things that
money
people most.
makers.
Yeah, well, and
Yeah.
that is one of the questions, isn't it? People at the moment are looking for, are they looking for fun, or are they looking for profitability? I think most time people are looking to make as much money as possible.
Yeah.
Some people are just out there having fun doing mining, but salvage and mining have been good money makers over the last few years, and
Oh yeah,
that's one of the reasons
definitely.
they're popular.
The only other thing I'd want to see from mining this year, like the only thing I have to see from mining, is our better ability to work with the mining bags to transfer ores and sell and refine ores that don't belong to us and move them around. Like there's so much potential in a mining operation with multiple ships, with refueling, with cargo haulers on site going back to the station or refining. Like it's really cool, but we still, just because of those mining bags, they still just fall into the floor or blow up your ship or something crazy.
And that's a good kind of example of the state of Star Citizen in some ways, isn't it? As in, there's so much about that process that's so good,
Yeah.
and then there's one little bit that just makes it all
Yeah.
kind of fall to pieces a bit.
I mean, it's exactly what we started with. And
Yeah.
it's exactly what Chris said in his letter. If they fixed
Yeah.
a lot of these underlying problems, the game loops that they have, people would really enjoy. And I think mining is very much a victim of that. Let's talk about
Yeah.
salvage, though. Like you said, another
Yeah.
very important profession, a moneymaker, the newest we've had, actually. Where do you think it is in terms of gameplay? You think people are enjoying it?
Yeah. I I think people, from my understanding, people do really enjoy it. They enjoy the chill nature of the scraping because it doesn't really require much skill. Is that unfair to say? It's not. There's
Yeah,
not like
I
huge
think, yeah.
amounts of danger involved. You're not going to get blown up by a rock like you might in mining.
It's like mining used to be considered relaxing until
Yeah,
salvage came along, and then you were like, oh, no, salvage is relaxing.
yeah, definitely. And where it probably differs from mining is that it doesn't feel like it's made much progress past the initial implementation. And obviously, we have the structural salvage now, where you disintegrate the ships, and that feels pretty placeholder, really. I think, in my opinion, it does the job, but it feels like the whole way they were thinking about the claw and everything. It feels like, oh, they just had to do something, and this is what we got. And so I would hope that by 1.0 they would have pushed this a bit further in terms of gameplay, but
Well,
maybe
do you believe that they'll redo it with Maelstrom?
Will they do that before 1.0? Maelstrom's a bit of a mystery, isn't it, in some ways, because it's quite a wide kind of reaching feature in that it will do FPS cover on one hand, and you'll be able to shoot a barrier and it'll kind of break to bits, and then also ships will be using Maelstrom. But I think we need an update. I think we need to know where it's at, and I fear that it isn't something that's going to come in this year. I think it's quite a big thing.
Yeah,
for them
I
to
would
pull
agree
off,
there.
but...
I agree with you. I don't think Salvage is coming this year. I don't think a new version of Salvage is coming this year. Although we do have some rumors of the Mist Fortune, which people think is that prospector looking silhouette of a ship. Maybe that is like a personal salvage ship. Do you think they would introduce any changes if they were bringing a new ship in? Like, that's a new form factor kind of for the profession.
Yeah, and well, if you take CIG on their word that they're not going to introduce ships until the gameplay is ready, do we say that the salvage gameplay is ready enough for them to sell another salvage ship? I mean, what's the purpose of this versus the Vulture?
Yeah,
I suppose.
I think, that's the biggest thing.
Maybe you're right.
Is it doing anything different? If it's literally just the Vulture but smaller, that seems a bit like a waste, right? Because the Vulture is pretty small on its own. It doesn't require two people.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, in terms of what you could do, we've got things like fuel salvaging, like siphoning, is something that at some stage will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I'd like to see from salvage when they actually do it is to increase the amount of variety that you can actually, the materials that you salvage. I think what we've got RMC and
CMC.
what's the one called?
Construction
and
materials.
so that's very limited in terms of the materials that actually might be used to make some of these ships up. Could you get some steel, some bits from different bits from it? That they could push it a lot further than it is, and there could be more skill involved. But again, do we think that they're going to push on salvage this year? I don't know. But yeah, you're right. A new ship coming suggests that maybe there is something in the works. We'll see.
You said two really good things there, though. First, the materials. We just talked about Maelstrom, and I think that Maelstrom is going to be part of them making the ships actually be the materials they are, and that's going to be so cool when you can break up a ship and see the literal steel that you get from that ship, and then take that steel and I'm going to repurpose this spaceship into a gun, and then I'm going to kill all that person's friends with the gun.
With their own gun, with their own steel. I like it. Yeah, full revenge.
Yeah,
I like that.
But that's really cool. I think that's a fun form of expansion to salvage that we could that's the kind of thing that they don't have to introduce a new version of salvage, right? That's kind of like the resource difference in mining. If they just gave us something different to salvage and care about, then the gameplay itself would probably take a huge step up. But you also mentioned fuel siphoning, which that's left field. I don't even think about that anymore, but that is the only form of salvage that they haven't delivered yet, that they said they were going to, right?
Yeah. We'd expect it at some point. Whether that will be before 1.0, I don't know. But if at any stage CIG decide to take fuel as a concept seriously again, and fueling, I mean, at some point they will. They'll come back to it, won't they?
Important, maybe in space.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's bizarre. Well, you don't need to go too deep into it, but obviously, Pyro was thought of as the time for fuel. Like, we're going to need to have refueling ships.
That's what they told us. They were like, you guys will be using Pyro for refueling, and here we are.
Yeah, and I wonder if that will happen at some point. But it makes, I mean, the other factor that we're not talking about here maybe is the idea of how engineering will affect salvage in terms of if engineering, depending on how they balance it, if we have to actually care about our components, salvaging components could well go up. But they've also talked about in the past just fuel for your ship, but also things like oxygen, haven't they? And other fuels that you might be required to have just to run your ship. So siphoning could well come into the foreground. But again, is that something they're going to want to do before 1.0? I don't know.
I don't even think that. Yeah, I don't think that's something that we'll see this year either. In terms of this year specifically,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many changes we might see from salvage other than just effect from economy changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might be not thinking of something. The best places they could probably make some updates are in the FPS segment. It looks like some of
Yeah.
the repair missions kind of scream of salvage a little bit. So maybe we'll see some FPS missions salvage wise as well in Pyro. But ultimately, I think salvage is going to continue to just be like a chill, make some money
Yeah.
gameplay. It doesn't really move too much in 25, but maybe we're wrong.
Yeah. I would agree. But yeah, we could be wrong.
Um, all right. Something a little more straightforward and in your face. Bounty hunting.
Yes.
This is like the oldest thing that we can do, but it's not really been
Mm-hmm.
upgraded that long, right?
No, and we're really still only talking about ship bounty hunting, aren't we? Really,
Yeah.
and we obviously there is a PvP element to bounty hunting, but I think when most people come into the game, at least, bounty hunting, PvE, ship bounty hunting is one of the main things that people. It's a space game. You have spaceships. It's kind of one of the things that people would go to. I mean, yeah, we've been promised bounty hunting upgrades over the last couple of years. They've fallen off the map. I'm a bit invested in this one in that I've got myself a Zeus MR, which is the kind of bounty hunting variant of that. But
Mhm.
that doesn't look like one of the ships that is going to be. It's not one of the ships that was teased in the kind of the blue teaser. Because that's not been teased, I don't think that there's any bounty hunting stuff planned for this year. I think, unfortunately, I think if they were, that's such an easy ship for them almost to finish off. If they were planning to drop some bounty hunting stuff, that I just think it's very unlikely that they're going to be dropping the the coffins effectively that we've seen teased in the past, where you can get somebody in a big coffin and wheel them into the jail place that we saw teased a couple of years ago. I think it's that's unlikely to change, and I think again, for a year of playability, there's probably other things that they want to focus on. Would be my guess.
Yeah. It's a bummer because they've been teasing bounty hunting I mean, ever since Quantum Economy was like demoed, they were talking about how you track NPCs who were doing crimes, and it's such a cool vision for bounty hunting. And we've seen them work on some of the other parts with they did a rework to the Hawk where you could get
Yeah,
like a body in the back of the Hawk, because you can tell they now have the gameplay designed and they're making the changes to make it work. But I'm guessing the NPCs and just the stability of the game doesn't even make it possible. And then Star Sim as a simulation, maybe it's not driving it. But I wonder how much the design of bounty hunting has changed since then, because that was really exciting.
yeah, and it's all good. Yeah, it's all good design. So in some ways, I mean, you're good at this in terms of looking back at what they said a while ago and then seeing it eventually come to fruition. I imagine what they've laid out so far will be what we eventually get, and it looks like it would work pretty well. It's just it doesn't seem to be. What's Jared's phrase? The development eye of Sauron or whatever. The focus is not on bounty hunting, unfortunately.
Yes, yeah, it is definitely not been a bounty hunting. So I think that like it's still a fun, straightforward thing to do, and in this year specifically, it's probably going to be pretty fun because of stability taking a step up. But I
Yeah,
don't know how much it's gonna take. Like it's just go place, blow up ship, and
yeah,
even at the bigger end of that spectrum, they still haven't seemingly boosted the bounty hunting challenges for the ships we're getting. Like you think with the Polaris getting dropped in, they should definitely be giving us
yeah.
things that make sense for a capital ship security patrol to go tackle. But no, it's just you take your Polaris and go kill those Mustangs, and hopefully you can pay your crew.
Yeah, I mean that's something they could quite easily do, isn't it? Is change some of
Yeah,
the ships, and make it a bit more challenging. So maybe that's the sort of thing we could see maybe this year.
I hope so. I do. And I also hope that we see some complications of it in Pyro. I think
Yeah,
we should like as you get better and better at bounty hunting, um in Stanton, you should start to get bounties from maybe not like the planets because they don't care about pyro, but maybe from like the Bounty Hunters Guild, you get
Yeah.
some way to go into the pyro system and track people down because I think it's still like being a criminal in pyro is like, yeah, you get your safe space, but you should also still be a little bit like, I am
100%.
technically still on the run.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's almost what they not promised, but almost what they hinted at when they were talking about the whole reputation stuff between the two gangs. They hinted at that one, if you really upset one, they might be really upset with you and send people after you. So it makes complete sense that the reputation with the two gangs would tie into some sort of bounty hunting kill orders, almost like one gang is really upset with you, so they put out
Taking
a
out a hit.
massive bounty. Yeah. I'd be shocked if we don't get that, and almost I'm shocked that in this version of 4.0 we don't have that as a priority because the whole thing that pyro is lawless, I've said this ages ago, but that's not really true. Like gangs aren't, they don't oversee lawlessness. They're just brutally enforce their own laws, and so it's very odd to have a system where at the moment, obviously it's not finished, there's no sort of deterrent to upset anybody. Like if you are really well aligned with the gang and somebody kills you, the gang should be a bit upset about that. Like that should happen. So
we can say lawless all we want, but like no gang is like, yeah, dude, just come in here and murder some of our folks. We're cool.
Yeah.
It's good. It's lawless land, you know.
It's a funny. Lawless will be a system that's empty. There's no there's no gangs. There's no population. Like if we suddenly jumped to an empty system where there was nothing there, that's lawless because there's nobody there to do anything. But gangs, we've all seen gang TV programs. There's no sense. There's definite laws. There's definite. You do this, there's a consequence. You can't do that. We meet up to have conversation. That lawlessness is the wrong phrase, I think, for pyro. But
I think they have done not a great job of marketing pyro because they've pushed this idea that it is like a lawless hellscape instead of being like, oh, this is just a less settled system. And that partially is probably because they wanted to make sure they weren't straying away too much from the initial lore. But I think they could have emphasized more that it's not necessarily lawless. It's just like dangerous or like Wild West kind of. Oh, I digress. We'll see pyro change over time and people will get the idea. Okay, let's talk about mercenary work. So it's not quite bounty hunting. It's combat, but it's generally FPS related. How are you feeling about that? What do you think could change there this year?
It's in a decent spot, isn't it? Again, it's one of the things that if you're new to the game, you tend to end up doing a load of bunker missions. Sorry, and so if as we've been seeing with 4.0 in the preview, if NPCs are fairly responsive, which they are at the moment, then it becomes a much more interesting gameplay loop because you're not just. I mean, for so long, people are you just turn up in a bunker with no clothes on, like karate chopping everybody. Like it's been a joke, hasn't it? In some ways, that you just haven't really had to take anything serious. Exactly. Yeah, it's those moves. And you didn't have to try at all. But now, in Pyro and also in Stanton, you can get yourself in some real trouble if you don't take it seriously. They're not as good as players. And what I've noticed from doing some of the contested zone stuff, which is sort of kind of mercenary-esque in some ways, is that the NPCs, they'll normally hit you with like an initial shot, as in they can laser you straight away, but they won't then finish you off quickly. So you feel like you're really under fire and under threat, but you probably won't. You have to kind of mess up a bit to get killed. But they are a threat, and I think almost we've already seen why that kind of whole loop will be better this year is because performance with server meshing and the server FPS and everything like that completely transforms what was a bit of a joke into something that is quite fun.
I think that's probably the most obvious place where we've seen improvements from server meshing, like you're saying. Everybody knows server meshing ain't perfect, guys. By the time this episode's coming out, we're still waiting for a hot fix to get 4.0.1 in and hopefully make the experience better. But when it does work, the little bits that it does, night and day. night and day difference in these mercenary missions, going into bunkers, playing against FPS people who are like responding. They as soon as you shoot, they start to converge on you. They flank you. They talk to each other. Um, they even revive each other. Somebody tried to get another NPC up yesterday while I was fighting him. So like, there's some really good stuff going on in this part of the game, and I think it's probably some of the most fun in the game at the moment.
Yeah.
It helps that they've added like new areas where you can do this. But I think
Yeah.
in general, with some of the FPS improvements from last year and then the looting capabilities we have, now you can sell stuff to loot, and like it's getting to be more and more interesting as somebody who just goes around and shoots and loots and explores. And it's like it's not just its own game loop, like the missions, the mercenary missions. It's just general existing in the world gameplay that I think has taken a step up, and you can see that in the mercenary missions. Do you think that we'll see missions added to this line of work this year?
Yeah, tricky because again, it's kind of in a decent-ish state, and so we'll see as you look at it and think, well, we can kind of leave that this year because if they're focusing on making the game decent enough that people actually want to play, you could argue that this one particular loop is like mining and maybe salvage is kind of okay and kind of fine how it is. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to see like almost soldier missions. I mean, soldier is one of the things that's on the 1.0 big list. There's like a big map of all the different professions, and yeah, can we go into like a big battle? As in, can we have two opposing? Can the two gangs of pyro? I mean, I'm now going off the deep end, but could the two gangs in pyro be having a big battle that you have to go and land and then play as an FPS map? It's almost like Battlefield. Like we've got huge play spaces. The possibilities for big scale FPS combat, especially if the servers are working fairly well, is massive. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, even thinking about things. I know you love Halo, but thinking back to my experiences of playing multiplayer Halo on pretty small maps, but you've got small vehicles, you running around. I mean, we're almost talking, dare I say it, about theatres of war. But could you get something like that into the PU, a big scale FPS battle that you're part of?
Yeah.
Who knows? But maybe.
Dude, with the size of these outposts and pyros are basically towns. So
Yeah.
yeah, if they could just get enough NPCs in there, that'd be fantastic fun. I'd love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
I hope we see some of that sort of thing.
yeah. And then mercenary work is tied into the reputation system, which is nice.
Yeah.
I do think this is a good part of the game for players. I also think we've got quite a few things from CitizenCon 2023 that we're kind of still waiting for that would make this a much more enjoyable experience. Things like sliding, new ladder animations, new takedowns, um, FPS weapon wear and tear, FPS scanning and radar.
Yeah.
These are all things that I think would add some depth to mercenary work.
Yeah. 100%.
So it's in a good place, and I think it could take a really good step up this year. Really, if they just made the game stable and added a couple missions, the FPS experience would be quite nice. I do think that they have some work to do, though, to make it feel snappier and still more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
There's
even know
some
what the word
issues
is.
around desync and around. If you play much Star Marine, I go through occasional like spurts of playing it for like a quite intensely for a few weeks, but
Mhm.
and then you realize there's nothing else to do. But it's it was pretty broken for most of its lifetime. It's getting better. The movement of the players is improving. But yeah, there are issues with desync, and especially when we're on big shards, lots of players. How will that hold up?
Yeah,
But it's stuff for them to try and test this year.
yeah. Okay. Just to get on to a couple of the other topics of this show.
Yep.
Let's talk about the other professions just by name. Let's just name what other choices players will have this year. So we went over
Yep.
mining, salvage, bounty hunting, mercenary work. What else is there, in your opinion?
Well, you've got the kind of they're all similar but not quite exactly the same. You've obviously got the idea of trading that you can buy your
Right.
own commodities. and then
Did you say trading and cargo hauling are different?
I would class trading as one thing, hauling as another thing, and courier as another thing. I think
Okay.
yeah, trading would probably be your own trading. You're putting your own money in, and you're buying boxes, and you're trying to sell them somewhere else and make some profit. So it's almost not. It's almost not a. It's not like a mission that's given. It's just something you can do off your own back in some ways.
Yeah.
And then hauling would be taking hauling contracts, almost like a lorry or a truck driver. You work for somebody else and you're delivering things. They're both of those things are in the game, obviously, as we speak. And then courier is the kind of smaller Amazon delivery box person sort of jobs. But yeah, that is that could do quite a bit of work. That one, the courier one, in some ways. Obviously, the box missions have always been a bit iffy, but there is so much potential there to transport really high value items to dangerous locations. For good profit. But yeah, at the moment you pick up 5 boxes and deliver them here, and it's a bit boring.
Yeah. It's like we've got the commodities, we've got the locations, we've got the ships, we've even got the function now. We really just need price differences and missions to make people want to do the cargo hauling stuff. Hopefully that's something that happens this year.
Yeah, some of the stuff in 4.0 is coming on. The economy is obviously going through quite a bit of a rework as it at the moment, and some of the prices of rewards for missions are going up. So they're doing stuff, and if you're into that sort of thing, hauling, trading, any kind of variations of that, I think you're pretty well covered. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously issues that we've had over the years where if you crash at the wrong point or the server dies, you can lose everything, can't you? So there's stability will help a lot with those ones, I think.
Yeah. What else besides cargo hauling?
Yeah, obviously you can class piracy, I suppose, as its own profession. I suppose it's
Sure.
like it is a thing, and it's obviously again not supported by kind of missions, which is one thing that might be interesting for CIG to do at some point. The idea that the NPC ships will travel around the star systems is not something that we have in game. They obviously spawn in for certain missions, but at one point, eventually, we'd hope that a caterpillar with a load of cargo will actually travel from one location to another to drop it off. And so the idea that piracy could be more than just PvP, but could actually you could pirate a PvE ship.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Whether the servers can handle NPCs flying all over the place, I'm not sure. We'll see. Maybe over the year, but well, eventually they will. But whether at this point the servers are in a good, there's enough server FPS to go around almost to have cargo ships going everywhere. But yeah, the universe feels a bit dead, I think, still when you only see player ships really flying around. Obviously, you see NPCs at various locations, but yeah. So piracy, yeah, you make your own fun, don't you? Really on that one, but
yeah, I think the biggest step up we could see this year when it comes to piracy is the addition of NPCs, because a lot of people think piracy automatically means PvP, but you can be a pirate attacking computers. Other computers can be pirates and attack you. There are plenty of situations in which piracy lives in the verse and doesn't include 2 players acting against one another. It might not even include violence. So we could both see the NPCs step up. Actually, there are a couple other ways that we could see this change. Reputation in Pyro, I think taking a step up would change the dynamic of how pirates work. And what was the last thing I was thinking? I was thinking something else in Stanton, but also security. Security is terrible. The way a lot of people judge the game right now is as if it is just this wasteland of anybody attacks anybody at all times and nothing happens, and like there's just no security. And I think one of the biggest things Star Citizen could do is introduce security, because saying that it's going to happen has not proven to be enough anymore. People don't get that idea that like in Stanton there will be a tangible difference than Pyro.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that we're talking about how well CIG have done with the FPS NPCs being so responsive and so not deadly, but they're deliberately tuned not to be deadly. I don't really understand why, especially things like station turrets and NPC spaceships cannot be as responsive as the FPS ones. Maybe I'm oversimplifying that, but you would think that with how quickly an NPC will lock onto you now in 4.0, an AI NPC on the ground, you would think that a turret on a station could also do the same thing. You should not be able to do some of the things that people do near stations and survive. You should just be blown out the sky. And
Yeah.
I'd hope that would happen this year.
Should be just insta kill.
In certain locations, yeah. If your crime stat is high enough, again, CRG can tune things to be as accurate or not accurate as they want. If you've got a lower crime stat and you are messing around outside of say Seraphim Station, maybe it will tag you a few times and discourage you and slowly ramp up and then eventually take you out. If you've killed half the star system, then maybe they get a bit more serious.
Then
and
it
they
is
just
insta kill.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure ever insta kill is the right thing for.
Yeah,
It
I think
depends.
you're right.
Yeah, it
I
might
think
be not the
insta kill is a bit much.
but you should be in serious trouble pretty quickly if you're messing around outside the station and you've got a big crime stat on you. I think, but
Yeah, I think
I'd hope to see that this year.
every space station should probably be able to have its own tractor beam, interdiction field, and turrets.
Yeah.
And then like it can very easily handle ships, so that it's like, oh, they shut us down. We can't quantum jump. You're not getting instantly killed, but you're in trouble, and it's something you want to avoid. But we need more of that, or else it's just always going to feel like a crazy town.
Yeah. And Stanton itself has never felt as secure as it probably was meant to, but hopefully, this is the sort of playability stuff. The lore system, how security works, is the sort of thing that you'd think in a year focused on playability, that would be focused on.
Yeah. I'm really going to be keeping an eye out for that this year. What other professions do we have that we haven't touched on?
Well, we now get into the more kind of questionable, are they in the game? But technically, you could be a racer, right? You could run around the game racing.
Technically, there's more missions for racing than mining.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
Yeah,
whether you'll find anybody ever to fly against, I don't know. I don't know how popular it is outside of there's some obviously big groups, Discords, and organisations that organise their own stuff. And so probably if you're a new player and you really love racing, the idea isn't that you just fly around Stanton. Are there any missions?
No, time trials.
In Pyro?
You go down and you can do time trials, so they don't require.
Are there any in Pyro?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. But you could do that in game, but probably get involved with one of the organisations. XGR. No, I say the wrong name. Which way around is it? Atmo. Both of them. There's two. Yeah, those two. And get involved in them. But whether you like your original question was, could you do that for a week? Could you solely race in Star Citizen for a week and not get bored? I don't know, because often it is time trials, Ralph. You're not racing anybody else, so it's in the game.
I think there are people who do a lot of regular racing. For average person, it probably offers some good fun for a little while. I think it can throw some diversity into your gameplay, but yeah, I'm not sure there's enough surrounding it in terms of like lore and rewards and unique in-game stuff to make it worthwhile for the people who are looking for Star Citizen. I think there are plenty of people who are interested in racing spaceships, but a lot of Star Citizen players want to do that and other stuff. And I think the other stuff still offers a little more depth than racing does. Yeah.
I mean, you've obviously got things like Daymar Rally and like, again, organisation events that probably could spend a whole year if you got really wrapped up into that in terms of practice and those bigger events. But yeah, I think what you're saying is completely correct. Other than that, we've got hunting is technically in the game in terms of there are animals.
Hunting.
But this year we're obviously getting, in theory, we're getting the sandworm. So monster hunting is coming. So that's actually going to be a viable thing.
Yeah, so we started to see hunting of fauna last year because Star Citizen finally has fauna. And actually going to the outposts and now starting to hear them naturally around does add life to the game. It makes it feel a little bit more alive. But the amount of stuff you could do with the resources you'd get from the current fauna is not much. Like I think you could sell it maybe, but no crafting or anything like that. It seems like
Yeah.
monster hunting, it it feels like it should be something that's fairly small, but it looks like they want it to be a pretty big part of the game. Like they want people to feel like they can go around hunting monsters for
Yeah.
for days on end, collecting their valuables and selling them for good money. So that is a really interesting profession. I didn't expect to blow up like that. But do you think it's going to take some good steps up this year with the sandworm?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the purpose that they've got for doing it is to harvest the big pearl things and whatever and teeth and whatever that when you, and the only reason really for that is for crafting. And
Yeah.
so it's probably quite dependent on crafting whether that becomes like a thing that you kind of like want to repeat over and over again this year. But it's a it kind of did take me by surprise. Obviously we've had the sandworm in the kind of lore and obviously in that CitizenCon 2016 was it?
17. Yeah.
17.
2016.
I can't remember which one, but it's been around. I didn't really expect them to turn this game into Monster Hunter, if that makes any sense. Like they've obviously got big plans for other big apex predators. It seems bizarre almost to just chuck Monster Hunter in the middle of Star Citizen, but I mean it's quite cool. But will it be another one of those features where they get the sandworm in and they're like, oh, this is good for tier 0, and then we don't see the other variants for ages?
Right.
Will they actually go for it and make it into a real big professional and keep developing it, or will they move on to something else? I don't know.
I think that's a big question people have about everything, given the way they're talking about this. They're like, we're going to keep things in EPTU. We're going to make them better before we release them. Okay, so does that mean you're going to launch the sandworm and then keep it in the EPTU for like 6 months? And are you going to give up the hype of dropping that into something that everybody wants to play live for 6 months so that it launches better to the game, if that means maybe less hype when it comes out? Because if so, that's a good move and that can really benefit people. But you need to stand by that.
Yeah, I think that's what their intent would be. That's one of the things I'm predicting will be in the EPTU at some stage this year. So yeah, we'll see. And you make a good point about how long it is in the EPTU and whether it loses its kind of shine because it's there for so long. I guess the hope is that because the EPTU is for kind of individual features that are a bit smaller than a whole patch, that they actually can iterate on them quicker and they can actually get them ready faster than 4.0. Obviously 4.0 is in the PTU for a long time. Hopefully the smaller focused EPTU patches on something like Monster Hunting don't stay in for months and months. Hopefully they make quite quick progress fixing stuff up.
Hopefully.
You ready for some real stretches?
Coke. Let's go.
Yeah. You can technically pick fruit and vegetables, so can you be a farmer?
Oh God. That's more of like a forager at that point.
Yeah. But you could work on a farm, maybe. You could be a farm worker, maybe, rather than a farmer.
And maybe at the end of your week of work, you can get a new magazine of pistol ammo.
Maybe that should be a challenge for somebody's gameplay video. They spend a week or a month just. How much money can you make by picking fruit?
New video series, Forager to Famous.
That's it. Yeah. And then obviously a touchy one for some people and a bit disappointing. Medical stuff is technically doable, but you
I see my man AAK in the chat.
Yeah, I saw, and you can do some stuff. Will they do anything with it this year? Will it improve? Will the medical system itself move forward anymore, or are they quite content where it is for now?
That's actually a really big question I have, is what the heck is going on with medical? Because they could leave it where it is and say, oh yeah, this is good enough for a game. For like a game, yeah. For a game where they want people to be medics in a profession, flying around helping people and doing special things, like we're gonna need more. They're gonna need some kind of a surgery system. And I don't mean surgery like you're doing all the, it's not surgery simulator, but we need deeper levels of things for medics to do besides mixing drugs, I think.
Yeah. And again, is that something that CIG will just say, it's okay for 1.0, or are they going to push it? I hope they do something more. It almost feels like everything in the game could be focused on this year, but will it be? Is probably the key question.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the things we're talking about here won't see focus, but we'll see some of the benefits that we're talking about from the other things that are seeing focus.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about mining, and like if they brought in crafting and base building into the game this year, if those things actually tied into things like mining and salvage in the ways we talked about today, those are huge additions without needing to really actually work on those.
Yeah. And in theory, that is true of medicine, isn't it? Like crafting medicine, creating drugs, that sort of stuff could tie into medical profession. Yeah, there's stuff there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a matter of, well, the RSI Apollo is also planned at least to see work this year. And would they really bring that ship in if they weren't changing things up?
Well, they did bring in the Terra pin, the Medipin.
Yeah. That was easy, though. That's just a Terrapin.
Yeah, but they bought a medical ship in without any changes to medical. So it's possible that they might. I don't know.
It's possible, but like the RSI Apollo, it's got drones, it's got all the beds on it. Like if they brought that in at this point without updating medical, I'd be like, why didn't you just put the Apollo in 3 years ago? What were you waiting for?
I think that's a very good question. I imagine it might be the drones that are the holdup, because I just don't think.
Yeah,
there's no,
but in that case, we should see drones when they release the ship. Because
we hope we see drones when they release the ship.
I
hope so.
Throw a little fit if we don't. You can count on that. All right. Last, I think that makes a ton of sense for people in the game is investigator. You can actually kind of take missions there. And then you could probably rope that into exploration in general. And I know people are going to lose it about exploration not having gameplay, but you just were editing this video, like you've seen what the argument is. I definitely think that exploration is realistic. You just can't technically get like officially paid for it through the game.
Yeah. I mean, it again in a year where they're going to focus on playability and stability and how good a game this is, effectively making it into a better game. It would be a bit mad if they didn't give us map markers that you can send to somebody. It seems like a really straightforward. I mean, that's me speaking not as a game developer, but you've got the ability to use the coordinate system that we obviously already have in the game. We've seen an example of it, obviously, at CitizenCon. It exists as a concept that they're going to give us the ability to mark things, and that is, like you say, that is exploration gameplay. That then allows you to explore things, sell them to other players, sell things you found to other players through the marker system.
Yeah.
That surely they've got to do that this year. Surely.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they don't, but they should.
FPS scanning would be a big part of that, identifying bodies and stuff. We've got these mini maps now that take place in different locations, space station and caves. So the investigation / exploration profession is definitely taking a step up. And I think something a lot of people have forgotten about is that they gave us a whole design brief on an update to investigation missions that we still haven't seen.
Yeah.
And it might be that they're waiting for the mission refactor to do that.
Yeah. I hope so. I do hope so, because it's the sort of thing that we obviously have. I mean, again, if you wanted to spend a whole week doing the Kovalex mission over and over again, you could do.
Or just going and finding dead bodies in caves.
Yeah, exactly. There are. I mean, if technically that is investigation stuff in the game, but yeah, what they showed off in that ISC, it was a while ago now, wasn't it? It was a.
Oh yeah.
Was it more?
That is CitizenCon 2021, I think.
Was it CitizenCon? Okay, yeah,
or
and
maybe
so
22.
They, again, that could be this thing that they've just parked and then it will suddenly appear, or they could have gone, this isn't quite what we want to do here, or this isn't going to quite work, and they've just canned it completely for now. So, I mean, there's also like hacking, obviously, something again that you're like, where's that gone? There's plenty of examples of features that have just like they were like, "Oh, it's coming. We're working on it," and then it's like, "Oh, it's not coming." So yeah, what a bizarre situation we're in to start this year, having really no idea what they're going to do for any of this stuff. We know the on the top level, we know that they're focused on playability, but how that looks, we've got no idea. It's a strange situation to be in.
Yeah. One of the more unpredictable points, I think, in Star Citizen's development, especially because now we've got server meshing. It's like
Yeah.
that was such a key goal for such a long time that now it's kind of like it's like all the development paths were going in their own lines, and then as we got closer to the server meshing, they all kind of linked up and concentrated into one point. Server meshing hits, and now everything starts to spread out again. And what direction does the development of each thing go in is an interesting topic. But
Definitely.
I have another question for you, kind of outside of these professions. Have you played other MMOs?
Yeah, I've dabbled in other ones, but I mean, the funny one everybody talks about is Star Wars Galaxy. My funny story with Star Wars Galaxy, Galaxy. Which way around it is? Just shows you how much I play.
I think it's Galaxies.
Galaxies.
Yeah.
I started playing 2 weeks before the servers got shut off originally. So I started playing. I was like, I love Star Wars. This looks great. I started playing, and then 2 weeks later, it was over. It was crazy. So
Dude, that sucks because I've heard amazing things.
yeah, and it was fun. It wasn't graphically very good at the point. I can't remember when it was, and you could probably go and work it out. But yeah, I played a bit of that. I've played again another Star Wars. I played a bit of the Old Republic, which is the other Star Wars one. Yeah, I've dabbled in ones. I've tried to keep up to date with the ones that are around at the moment. So Ashes of Creation is obviously very popular at the moment. So I tried to kind of keep my information up. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, I dabble more than I'm no sort of wizard, but I know enough.
In that case, let's take like a profession that you would be doing in one of the other games, whether it's mining or looting or just like running combat missions and raids. How does the current state of Star Citizen compare to that? Essentially, when you look at Star Citizen's game loops, how far off is it from what somebody might say is a release ready MMO that people are playing?
Yeah, I mean, mining is the interesting one, isn't it? Because what we have in mining now is already more, in some ways, more complicated and complex than what we have in many MMO games. Mining can be as simple as you click a button and you're mining. Like that. That is often how it works. And so the gameplay that we've got is fairly well developed, but like we talked about before, the reasons and the reasoning and the linked up nature of the economy and the whole universe is almost non-existent at this stage as we start 2025. So
yeah,
once we have crafting and base building, whether they come this year or in any form or whatever, mining I think is in a good spot in that, like we've talked about, is mining fun? People might say it's fun. People might not say it's fun. I think it's pretty fun. As a gameplay experience, it's not click, wait, and click again. Like there is more. It's more involved in that. So I think mining is in a good space compared to most. I mean, even I looking at Elite Dangerous, which is a bit more kind of it's kind of talked about as a good example of mining. Star Citizens is more complicated and more complex in some ways. So,
but I hear Elites is more fun, more applied, like the deep core mining, a little more interesting.
I had a quick look before we did this at it, and I was looking at just lasering asteroids the same way that you do in Star Citizen, and it looked less fun than Star Citizens. But yes, I'm aware that there are different types of mining, and I suppose that is the key point, as you mentioned earlier. In Star Citizen, we are not drilling down into planets or asteroids, anything like that. There is almost entire other parts of mining that we probably need to compare to something like Elite, where there's different ways you can do it. So, yeah, it's we want to be able to. And interestingly, looking at the CitizenCon presentation on the crafting and base building, they showed scans of planets, obviously concept art and nowhere near actually in game, but scans of planets where you found a resource deposit that looked underground to me. So are they planning on the ability to drill down
Yeah.
with the ship,
Yeah.
or will it just be with bases?
Big
I
questions
don't know.
there, yeah. Also, something I forgot to mention, something that they could do to help with mining is introducing refining. We didn't even mention that. It's something they haven't talked about in a while that they wanted to do with the Expanse and sort of for fuel refining, but they've talked about a little bit more in terms of crafting now. Is like if they brought that in, that would also really increase the mining game
Yeah,
loop.
yeah. I I think mining is on the right track compared to other games. I would
Yeah.
probably summarize that by saying, but there's other parts that, yeah. I mean, the idea of raiding in an MMO is something that we don't really have, apart from maybe now the contested zones are similar-ish. Like, it's not exactly the same thing, but you're going in probably with a group to run through some content to get a prize at the end. That's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Will we get that in other locations other than the contested zones? Will that ever be a PvE thing that you can do? Obviously, we had the raids of the distribution centers that we saw at CitizenCon. Was that just 2 years ago? Was it where
Yeah.
they kind of showed that as the big idea for raiding? That's gone quiet, but did that then morph into the contested zone stuff? I don't know, but yeah, I mean, at the moment, I think unless you're going in with a group or you're some sort of FPS wizard, the contested zones are not like an easy place to run through content. Which in a lot of MMOs, there are areas of the game where you just can push through it with your group. If you're leveled, I mean, that's the bizarre thing. Obviously, with Star Citizen, it's MMO, but it doesn't have this concept of levels and content being designed for certain levels. And it is an MMO in some way. It is an MMO, but it's yeah. There's areas where it goes off into its own thing in some ways. So it's not always the best thing to compare it to like a straight MMO, like something like WoW or something like that. It's obviously very different from something like that, but yeah, it's interesting.
Different kind of beast, but it sounds like it's getting close to offering parity to people when it comes to looking for that MMO experience. Like we all can see very obvious points where Star Citizen is lacking, but with the overall
Yep.
vision, it does sound like it's starting to offer um, a large amount of the things that people would look for traditionally in an MMO.
Yeah, I mean, the big stuff that they talked about this year's CitizenCon that would help on that would be all the social tools and
Right.
the
Oh, yeah.
org tools in game. I mean, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting thing to kind of track through this year. Will we see some improvements in terms of the comms in game, VoIP stuff, but friends lists and party finders? Will the guide system, all the stuff that they show for that, make it? There's all sorts of stuff they could do there, but again, what we saw was just they were just concept slides. There were ideas. This is what
Yeah.
we
Those
would
looked
like to
far away.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but it's not art. It's not requiring tons of artwork, if that makes any sense. As in, it is a back end under the hood piece of development. It doesn't require them to model out like a whole city or something or a landing zone. So that there's a case to say it could come quicker than some things, but
yeah,
we'll see.
that's important. I think that would be a big part of making the game step up this year. But they don't have big pieces now. Oh, they have big pieces. It's not as daunting as it has been. Getting getting the actual game renderer into a good place.
Yeah,
Engineering is like such a big underlying part of how ships and cities work. Server
yeah,
meshing, seems to be having some issues with the database, but these are all such huge things that have all been accomplished in the last 2 years that really feel like they've removed a lot of the roadblocks to Star Citizen starting to be like a more widely enjoyable experience, which is good.
yeah.
Speaking of which, just to kind of finish off today's talk, I want to ask, is the game getting more fun? The changes that we've been seeing, does it feel like it has taken significant steps up in your opinion? And if so, does it feel like it's been doing so faster over this last year or two than it was, say, back in 2018, 2019, 2020 time?
That is a very good question, and I think, is it getting more fun? is one way of looking at it. Is it getting better? Is another way of looking at it. But I think probably it's getting. If you think about what we've had over the last couple of years, obviously 323, despite actually being somewhat disappointing in some ways, in that it didn't feel like it changed the whole game. A lot of the quality of life stuff, star map, all the UI stuff that changed, has made the game more enjoyable to play. Just in some ways because it looks better. It looks like a game again instead of a
Yeah.
tech demo. It looks
Mhm.
much more up to date. But also, actually, the quality of life stuff has made a fairly decent difference to how fun it is to play the game. But then the rest of this year was almost just completely waiting for 4.0, and so it came like it came at the end of the year. So we'll say that we'll all probably look back at 2024 and say in the end it was a good year. The game did get better. Server meshing is a significant. Again, we will acknowledge the fact that some people just can't play the game right now, but when it does work, it is a significantly better experience all round. It is more fun because of things like we talked about. The FPS combat stuff works so much better, and so it it is getting better. I had a quick look before and had a quick look at what sorts of things we were getting in that time period, kind of 2018, 2019. We were getting things that were in theory quite fun. We were getting like new mission givers, something that's completely
Yeah.
just dropped off. There was a
I think
focus
they're
more. Go on.
I think they're starting to talk about that. They've talked about it in the monthly reports a little bit, updating them. And then at 1.0, they talked about how they want to have like characters representing factions. So I think they're getting ready to jump back in on the mission givers.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be shocking if, like we're talking about this whole content focus for this year of bringing events, it wouldn't be shocking if some mission givers were part of that plan, that they
Yeah.
dropped a new mission giver in one of the quarterly patches at some point this year. And so, yeah, I think ultimately, if you look back at where the game was a few years ago, it is now with server meshing in 4.0 technically live. It is miles ahead of where it was. But it does just feel like it almost feels like, yeah, you've been on one of the moons. It's been in complete darkness for the last 12 years, and now we can just about see the sunrise. And so the sun is coming up, and hopefully we're on the verge of it actually getting good. But I don't think the sun is going to completely rise in 1 year. I think it's going to be a multi-year thing towards 1.0, where suddenly the game gets more fun and gets better. I don't think, despite CIG saying this is the year of playability, I don't think it will be a perfect experience by the end of 2025.
Yeah, no way. Yeah. They can't go from basically like pre-alpha to or alpha to full playability. But I do think that, and as is the subject of this whole show, a lot of people are sitting here playing Star Citizen and thinking, man, if this was just 20% better performing, it would be a good game. And we're by no means going to make it to where Star Citizen should be this year.
Yeah.
I don't even think we'll make it to where we want it to be this year. But I do think that we could see a significant enough increase this year to bring a lot of people back and actually keep them finally. We've been going through this period of Star Citizen, and I think try the game, come back in a year. Try the game, come back in 2 quarters. And there's a different point for everybody that changes, but I think a lot of people, that changes when the game becomes something they can play like maybe every week or so. And that could happen this year.
Yeah, I mean, to play devil's advocate slightly, the only thing that I think we have to be wary of is we talked about the content a lot today. Can they release enough content to keep people coming back? Because my fear would be, to play devil's advocate, is that if the game was less buggy and was stable, and you didn't crash out and lose your progress on certain things all the time, with the current content that's in the game, you would play probably more for a short period of time, but then you'd probably still get to the point where you're like, there's
That's
no
possible.
greater meaning to this. Unless they can get some sort of, either they're going to get the wider big kind of sandbox stuff in, like crafting and base building, which I think to get that stuff in this series is tough.
Yeah.
Or they're going to be able to consistently pump out the content the big mission types, like we talked about, the new versions of or whatever of Save Stanton and Overdrive, can they release those quick enough, quarterly maybe, to keep people coming back to finish off those mission chains? Because from my experience, even though I've had the worst experience I've ever had in gaming in Save Stanton, I still do want to finish it because I know there's a part 2 coming, and I don't know what the reward for part 2 might be. It might be something I really want to do. So, yeah, they'll have to deliver.
They've got to keep the content going, and whether they do that or not, I think people are going to see their game experience change quite a bit this year, no matter what. More than last year, more than probably most, if not any other year, depending on what they can get in this year. I think the base building and crafting is a big part of that, but overall, just optimization wise, performance improvements wise, I think people are going to see a lot more change this year than they're used to, and hopefully that's better for the game. Hopefully by this time next year we're looking at an actually different experience, and Squadron hasn't been delayed another 2 years, and the game is playable.
Well, they'll have had to go wrong on such an incredible level that it would be unbelievable to actually have a year where they tried to do all the things that talk about stability, performance. There's no way they can make the game worse. Like, they can't
don't tempt them, man.
Well, no, I'm sticking with that. There's no way that this game, if they do this year, can be in a worse state. Whether it's made enough progress for people to be excited about it going forward, but the game itself should be in a significantly better place than it was right now as we see. That's the bare minimum. Hopefully they can take it quite a bit past that.
I joke, but I definitely agree with you. I think at the beginning of last year, we would look at 4.0 and say, hey, we don't know. 4.0 is going to come out and it's significant, it's huge, but we don't know how the game will be running afterward. At this point, 4.0 has come out, and now I think we can adequately say, like you said, that like this is the lowest. When Benoit said last year, it will get worse before it gets better with server meshing, this is what he meant. I hope, and I think that we'll be on an upward trajectory from here.
Yeah, and the thing is, when it works, 4.0, again, we'll caveat by saying, I know a lot of people can't even get in. When it does work, it's pretty remarkable how well it's working. It's just obviously a lot of people can't get in the game, but it's not a bad place to be starting from in terms of server meshing itself. But yeah, the missions, the bugs, everything else, let's hope that this year is good.
All right, man. Thank you so much, TenPoundFortyTwo, for joining me for this week's talk. One of optimism, one of a bit of a look at what we could see this year in Star Citizen, but hopefully this primed you guys for the rest of 2025. We will be here as always with the launch sequence, hitting you up every week, keeping you up to date, letting you know what's going on with development. Thank you all so much for being here. And 10 Pound, before we sign off, can you let everybody know where they can find your own content?
Yeah, just TenPoundFortyTwo on YouTube, nowhere else. Mostly performance stuff. If you want to know how well your PC might run the game, or if you want to think about what parts might help you get better performance, all that sort of stuff, that's the main stuff. But occasionally I'll venture into giving my opinion on stuff, which sometimes results in negative comments. Sometimes it doesn't.
You don't have to say it. I know it's all the time. I actually realized we didn't even go over game performance today, which is what we normally spend a lot of time on.
Yeah.
Quick 20-second answer. Has it improved with 4.0?
Yeah. So the thing is that 324.3 even is actually in a really poor state performance-wise. It's quite significantly down on even .2. Obviously, you've had a load of stuff running on that. We had Luminalia, Save Stanton there, so actually performance is bad. So 4.0 compared to that is actually pretty good, but 4.0, the main thing compared to where it was on the PTU, 4.0 was pretty rough on the PTU performance-wise. The space stations were pretty horrible to run around on, even on high-end hardware, but actually when it's gone live, CIG have done loads of work, loads of optimization, lots of patch notes talking about optimizations in different locations. It's running pretty well on high-end hardware. Still, if you're on fairly low end hardware, so my minimum spec system, which is an i5 10400 and a GTX 1660, 16 gigabytes of RAM, that's pretty rough. But on decent hardware, it's running pretty good. But the actual, probably most exciting thing that I've seen so far is that Vulkan has, since it's come into the game, has been a fair way behind DX11 in terms of average frame rate. But in 4.0, it's actually pretty much matching it. So there is hope that as we go into the future with Vulkan, as we see the multi-threaded rendering stuff that they talked about, hopefully Vulkan will start to outperform DX11, and then eventually CIG will just turn off DX11. So there are good signs coming, and they actually have done a pretty remarkable job compared to how bad it was at points in the PTU.
Okay, cool. Looking forward to seeing where that goes from here. Well, thank you again so much for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching, for joining us for 2024, and for hopping on the bandwagon for 25. I think it's going to be an interesting year in gaming, even if not with Star Citizen, folks. We have our eyes on Elite Dangerous, on X4, on Jump Ship, on Outer Worlds. There's a lot of space stuff going on this year, so I'm excited to talk video games throughout it, but hope you'll join me here on the launch sequence throughout the time to join me. I said join me twice. Anyways, thank you again one more time for joining me, and 10 Pound, thanks for being a wonderful guest, dude.
Cheers.
All right, see you all next week.